By definition, solar thermal energy is a technology for harnessing solar energy for thermal energy, which can be used for heat. This technology utilizes collectors to heat water for domestic use. The three most common collectors are evacuated tubes, flat plate, and thermal siphon collectors. I'll explain each type as we proceed. The three most common applications for solar thermal are domestic hot water, space heating, and pool and spa heating. In domestic hot water applications, water is heated and can be used for cooking, cleaning, and bathing. A properly sized system can reduce your monthly hot water bill by 50% or greater with a relatively small capital investment. Space heating applications is where you can tie in your existing heating system with your solar collectors, whether it be hydronic or forced hot air. And lastly, pool and spa heating. Now, one thing to note if you're considering pool or spa heating is that it would be foolish and not very cost effective to have a solar pool or spa heater and not have it integrated into your home. Well, the reason would be, what do you do with the heat produced in the winter months? Especially if you live in a warm climate and you're not heating your pool, you could certainly heat some hot water with it. Here's an example of what evacuated tubes look like. Now, these collectors have multiple evacuated glass tubes which heat up solar absorbers and ultimately solar working fluid in order to heat domestic hot water or for hydronic space heating. The vacuum within the evacuated tubes reduces convection and conduction heat losses, allowing them to reach considerably higher temperatures than most flat plate collectors. The evacuated tubes draw their energy from the available light rather than outside temperature. For these reasons, they can perform well in colder conditions. Here's an example of what flat plate collectors look like. A flat plate collector is the most common type of solar thermal collector and is usually used as a solar hot water panel to generate solar hot water. A weatherproofed insulated box containing a black metal absorber sheet with built-in pipes is placed in the path of sunlight. Solar energy heats up water in the pipes, causing it to circulate through the system by natural convection. The water is usually passed to a storage tank located above the collector. This passive solar water heating system is generally used in hotels and in homes in sunny climates. Next, here we have an example of a thermal siphon collector. A thermal siphon system in their typical configuration do not have pumps or other controls. They are based on natural convection principle. Hot water rises and cold water sinks. In the case of thermal siphon systems, as the potable water or antifreeze fluid in colder climates entered into the collector, it warms and rises to the top of the collector into the tank where it is stored. That's the reason why tanks are always above the collector. Here I've listed a few of the different pros and cons of evacuated tubes and flat plate collectors. Some of the more obvious pros for evacuated tubes are they're ideal for colder climates. They're able to achieve very high temperatures, and their optimal design maximizes solar radiation, and that they are shaped as a cylinder, and which enables them to maintain that ideal perpendicular angle with the sun for longer hours throughout the day, as opposed to a flat plate collector. Now, flat plate collectors are pretty efficient in warmer climates. They have a pretty reliable and proven history, and they have relatively low installation costs. The downside with the flat plate collectors is they're inefficient in the colder climates, and I wouldn't recommend installing them even with a drain back system in the Northeast. Now, one of the negatives with the evacuated tubes, is they do cost considerably more than a flat plate collector. However, I wouldn't want that to deter anybody because their efficiency certainly makes up for it. Now, one of the major advantages of a thermal siphon collector is that they are very simple and they require no moving parts or electricity to operate. One of the only drawbacks on these type of collectors is that the collectors themselves, the glass tubes, need to be located below the storage tank. So the area in where you heat your water and store the water is actually in a vessel above the collectors. So this can cause for some higher roof load and just make installation a little bit more difficult than your typical type of collector. Here we see an example of what some evacuated tube collectors will look like on a rooftop. Now you can note in this installation that the collectors are mounted over the ridge of a roof, and it just goes to show the versatility of how we can mount these units. Because as with any solar product, on the latitude in which we live, everything needs to be facing the south or southeast to achieve maximum efficiency. Here's an example of a basic solar hot water heating system. On the right, you will notice an 80-gallon solar hot water storage tank. Now these tanks do differ from your typical hot water storage tank in that they're much more greatly insulated, and they have a heat exchanger that runs through the middle of the tank, and where the heat transfer occurs from the heat in your collectors to heat your hot water. Here's an example of what it looks like to have a solar hot water heating system tied into your existing hot water boiler. Here's an example of a thermal siphon unit that is mounted on the ground. Now I wouldn't always recommend mounting these units on the ground, however it just goes to show the versatility of where and how these items can be installed. Here's an example of what some flat plate collectors look like on the roof. Now there is different ways we can mount these depending on the location and the kind of angle that we need to achieve. But typically they are mounted flat like that. And another disadvantage of being in the Northeast with these is that they will easily be buried with snow. At least with the evacuated tubes, there's a chance, or more likely, the snow will fall in between the tubes. And also, if there's not a lot of coverage over them and it's a really good sunny day, that solar radiation will penetrate the snow, and the units will actually still work. They're not going to be as 100% efficient as if they were cleared, but they will still produce heat. Currently, there is only a 30% federal tax incentive available for residential and commercial solar thermal applications. And also, like with the photovoltaics, there are federal loan and grant programs, and more information can be found at www.dsireusa.org. Now here is an overview of some generalized costs associated with installing solar thermal onto your home. Typical solar thermal costs for domestic hot water range from $3,000 to $5,000, plus the cost of installation, which will vary depending on complexity of the system. For zoned heating applications, the cost can range from $12,000 and up, plus installation. The payback for these systems can vary greatly depending on usage and cost of current fuel. Typically, you can expect to cut your hot water bill by a minimum of 50% and greatly reduce the amount of fuel needed to heat your home if you have an integrated solar thermal heating system. Now, like with the solar photovoltaics, these systems have a long lifetime and will repay for themselves many times over the course of that life. Now, if you are seriously considering solar for your home, the first step is to have us come out and perform an on-site evaluation. And also during this process, we will be creating a budget in order for us to design the most efficient and cost-effective PV or solar thermal system for your home. Now there is a fee for this service, and if you choose to have the system installed, that charge will come off the final price. Now, as I had mentioned earlier in this presentation, in order to receive the rebates and incentives available, certain guidelines have to be met. For example, the detailed record of sun exposure for your area will be looked at, and a shading analysis will be performed to determine sun exposure and potential energy production for your home. Now typically, the area in which you have your panels or collectors installed cannot surpass 25% shading. Also, for solar electric, a detailed description and wiring schematic must be submitted to your utility for review before net metering can begin. And during this process, for either solar electric or heat, you will see a detailed cost analysis and breakdown of your system. Now this concludes our presentation, and I want to thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about solar applications and how they can benefit you and your home. Now if you would like to set up a site survey or have any further questions, please contact me at steve@downeyenergy.com or visit us at www.downeyenergy.com. And we look forward to working with you to come up with new and creative ideas to meet your energy needs for your home.